Good morning, everyone. Thanks. My name is Lee Copeland. I work with software quality engineering. And as announced, we run the Star East and Star West testing conferences. This year, we're also doing a new one called Star Canada. We're going to be in Toronto next month, and we're excited to do that. Invite you all to come to our conferences. That's the sales pitch that I'm required to give. I've been asked to talk about one of my favorite topics. It's called the 9 Forgettings. In my work as program chair, I talk to hundreds of people every year about what they're doing in testing, kind of the state of the practice. Also, in my consulting work for SQE, I visit lots of organizations and see what they're doing. And over the years, I have come away concerned, sometimes even saddened by what I see going on in our profession. And so today I want to talk about some of these things, and I have a list of 9 things that I want to talk about. And the first one I'm concerned about is that we have forgotten our beginnings. Or perhaps as testers, it's not that we've forgotten, we don't even know what our beginnings are. And so let's look at some people here. Anybody know who these folks are? Recognize some pictures? Well, the top one in the middle there is Hippocrates, who's the father of Western medicine. And if you're in the health professions, you know who Hippocrates is. You know what he did. Isaac Newton, if you're a physicist, classical physicist, you know Newton, and you know the contribution that he made. Darwin, if you're a biologist involved in any of those disciplines, you know Darwin and the great contribution that he made. Sigmund Freud, if you're in the social sciences, psychology, sociology, you know Freud. Einstein, if you're in modern physics, you know Einstein and the great contribution. These are the grandfathers of these disciplines. Now, do you know who this final person is here? Anybody recognize him? Well, that's Les Paul. And Les Paul is the inventor of the solid body electric guitar. And, he's an important guy also in our world. Now, how about these people? These are the grandfathers of testing. Anybody know who all 6 are? Raise your hands, would you? 5? 4? 3? 2? All right, we'll stop there. Let's talk about these folks. Glenford Myers wrote essentially the first book on formal software testing back in 1978. Myers and co-workers of his at IBM essentially invented the kind of formal testing that we know today. And yet, most of us don't know him. Boris Beiser, another one of the grandfathers of formal testing, he's kind of a crusty, curmudgeonly old guy, thinks that if we don't achieve things like 100% code coverage, we should be thrown in jail. He said things like that. But Boris also is one of the early authors. His first book on testing was back in the late 70s, early 80s. Tom McCabe, if you know about cyclomatic complexity, McCabe essentially invented the first testing metrics. And there's a company called McCabe and Associates. They make all kinds of testing tools. You should know him. Michael Fagan. Anybody heard of things called Fagan inspections? The first formal idea of doing code inspections. His first paper at IBM was published in 1976. Bill Perry organized the very first conference on software testing. And this is Dave Gelprin, who's one of the founders of our company. We have to have his picture up here. These are the grandfathers of formal testing, and like I say, I'm concerned that we don't know who they are. Most of us don't recognize them for the contributions that they made. And I just wonder how we can call ourselves professional testers if we're ignorant of our own history. What would you think of a doctor who was ignorant of the history of medicine, or a physicist or chemist ignorant of their roots? It concerns me. And just as they kind of laid the foundation for software testing that we have today, it's our job now to advance that, to come up with new ideas and new techniques and new methodologies and so on. But I don't think we can do that well unless we really understand who the grandfathers are. Number 2, forgetting to grow. In my consulting work, I do a lot of test process assessments. You can hire our company to come in and do an assessment of your testing process and make suggestions on how you might improve. One of the classic questions that I ask people in interviews is, what's your favorite book on software testing? And almost without fail, this is the answer that I get. I've never read a book on software testing. And again, I wonder how we can claim to be professionals, how we can want respect. We want project managers and development managers to pay attention to what we say, and yet we answer this question in this way. Let me give you a little story. Now, I certainly don't hope this happens, but imagine that going home from the conference today, you are in some kind of traffic accident. You wake up from unconsciousness, and you realize that you're lying on your back, and there are lights kind of going over your head, and you hear all kinds of sounds, and someone leans over, and they have a mask on. They say, "I'm Dr. So-and-so. You've been in an accident. You have a brain injury. I'm going to be your brain surgeon. I will take good care of you." And in a moment of clarity, you remember back to my talk today, and you turn to them and say, "Doc, what's your favorite book on brain surgery?" And they say this. If we want to be taken seriously as a profession, as professionals, I think we need to learn the universally accepted techniques and processes of our work. And one way to do those is by reading books. I don't know how we can call ourselves professional testers if we are ignorant of the basic foundation of our craft. So I'm concerned that we're forgetting to grow. I'm also concerned that this clicker doesn't work. There we go. So, here's just a list of books in no particular order. Thank you. Anybody here have read all of these? Yes? Good. Thank you. All right. There's lots of good stuff out there, and I think it's important for us to grow. Have you considered obtaining a certification? Certification means, at least in my view, that you've taken some extra time and studied. You've applied yourself, trying to better your understanding. Or, maybe you could just go buy a hat and have the word tester written on it, and that's good enough. I would hope that you would grow. Number 3, forgetting to properly measure. H.L. Mencken, who was a newspaperman in the States back in the 1940s, once said this: "For every complex problem, there is a solution that is simple, neat, and wrong." And I don't think that's anywhere more evident than in the testing business as some of the metrics that we gather, some of the things that we measure. Consider these. Number of test cases created. How many of you measure that? That's a metric you gather and publicize. Okay, fair number of people. If we rewarded people based on the number of test cases written, what might we get? Right, more test cases. Would they be any better? Not necessarily, but I think we'd probably get more. How about the number of test cases executed? Again, if that's how you're measuring people and rewarding people, my guess is you're going to get more of those. Okay? Number of test cases passed. Oh, I know how to make that go up. And one of my favorites, defect found per tester. Let's say that I'm the manager, the test manager. I say, now, how many did you find defects last week? And this gentleman says, I found 10. I said, that's pretty good. I go over here and I ask you, and I said, how many did you find? He said, I found 50. Who is obviously the better tester? See, I don't know. It depends, that's right. The system he's testing may be almost defect-free. Those may be the only 10 in there. And this gentleman may be testing a system that is just so full of defects that he only worked a half a day a week and found 50 right off the bat. So watch out for these kind of things. A shameless plug, I'm doing a talk this afternoon called The Mismeasure of Software, where I'm going to rant and rave more about this topic. If you'd like to come here, I'd certainly invite you. So what happens when we measure the wrong things? First of all, we just wind up wasting our organization's resources. We spend all this time doing stuff that really ultimately doesn't matter. We gather meaningless information. And then often in organizations, we use that information in ways that hurt other people. And that's not what we should be doing. Okay? Number 4, forgetting to properly reward. There are a number of reward punishment systems in effect, and these are just some that I've dealt with over the years. Since we work under a contract, only time in grade matters. Let me give you an example. Some years ago, one of my children was in elementary school, and they had this fantastic teacher who did not do history, did not do mathematics, did not do English composition, didn't do any of that usual dull, boring stuff that kids hate. What she did was she had the kids write a book, research and write a book on the history of the town where we lived. And it was ultimately published and won awards and so on. And the kids loved it. What didn't they realize they were doing? Math, history, English composition. They were doing all of those things. But she hid it in this wonderful way. And the kids just loved it. A number of us parents went to the school administrator at the end of the year and said, this teacher is fantastic. You need to reward this teacher for her good work. And we were told, no. She works under a contract. She has a certain educational level. She has a certain number of years' experience. That sets her pay. That sets her salary. There's no way to reward her under our system. Isn't that terrible? What does that say? Have you seen this one? Since we work as a team, we especially see this in the Agile world, since we're all a team, and we have group hugs and things like that at our Scrum meetings, there are no exceptional contributors. No one on our team is outstanding. We're all great because, if one person was outstanding, that might hurt the feelings of other people. Okay, well, how about the Rotating Exceptional Contributor Award? Let me tell you a quick story about that. Years ago, back in the 70s, I worked for a mini-computer vendor, and I was what's called a systems engineer, and we had the Systems Engineer of the Quarter award. Whoever was the best systems engineer who contributed the most got this award. It turned out it rotated. There were 4 areas in our region, and so the first quarter, somebody from Area 1 would win. The second quarter, someone from Area 2 would win, and you see how the pattern is. I was the only systems engineer in Area 3. Guess who won the award every year? Guess when I won it every year? Guess where those awards are today? Do they mean anything to me? No, they don't. Okay? I have them all. My wife would never let me throw them away. They're in the bottom drawer in my bedroom in this cupboard. And for years I tried to throw them away. Now I recycle them. Whenever one of my kids or grandkids does something cool, I go get one of these plaques out of the bottom drawer. I rip off the metal, it has all the words on it, and I take it down to the store, and I get new words engraved on it. Highest score, football player, da-da-da-da-da. And I give them to the grandkids. They think it's great. But it meant nothing to me. And then some of us have probably seen these situations where we're given some salary increase. But by the time you take out taxes and this and that and divide it by 52 weeks in a year, it's essentially about 2 medium-sized pizzas. It doesn't really inspire us to work very, very much harder. So forgetting to properly reward is a difficult thing. Here's a famous quote from some guy. If you measure the wrong thing and then you reward the wrong thing, don't be surprised that you get the wrong thing. Now, does that make sense? Does that seem like rocket science to you? It doesn't to me. Yet over and over and over again, I see management that measures the wrong thing and rewards the wrong thing, and then they're surprised that they get the wrong thing. And you've probably seen, I hope you've seen this Dilbert cartoon. The pointy hair boss says, our goal is to write bug-free software. I'll pay a $10 bonus for every bug you find and fix. And then he says, I hope this drives the right behavior. Well, it's not going to. And Wally over here says, I'm going to write me a new minivan this afternoon. Again, if you measure the wrong thing and then you reward the wrong thing, don't be surprised that you get the wrong thing. Okay? When we don't reward people for their efforts, for their accomplishments, what we're doing is we're sending them messages, very loud messages. Things like, your efforts are not appreciated. Your accomplishments here are meaningless. And the key one is, you don't matter. That's what reward mechanisms send. Those are the messages they send when they're not well crafted, when they're not well designed. And so is it any wonder that, employees just don't give their all to their organizations anymore? It doesn't surprise me at all. So forgetting to properly reward is an important one for me. And remember this, different people like different kinds of rewards. Some people like money. Some people like fame. Some people like power. Some people like praise from the boss. The admiration of their peers, that's mine. That's mine. Okay, this other stuff doesn't matter to me. But the admiration of people who I respect, people who are my peers, that excites me. That's what turns me on. Some people like certificates and plaques. Okay? Others like getting time off, as a reward. Some people like to go to conferences as a reward. At SQE, we offer lots of training classes, and on the last day of the class, we pass out certificates to people who've attended the class. Half of those certificates wind up in the trash before they even leave the room. Most, I think, and I'm going to take a quick survey here, I think most people in our business, those things just don't matter. The certificates, the plaques. How many of you take those home and mount them on your wall? One. All right. Now, have you ever been in the office of, say, an insurance salesperson? They sell life insurance, car insurance. What do they have all over their walls? Those certificates, they love that stuff. Some people do and some people don't. And this is one of the things you have to think of as a test manager, is to know specifically for each of your employees what turns them on. What kind of reward do they like? I spend a lot of nights away from home, not nearly as many as I used to, but still enough. How does the airline reward me for spending nights away from home? By giving me these point things that I can turn into more nights away from home. Okay. Number 5, forgetting the boundaries. How many of you have been in these situations? Because the business analyst didn't write good requirements, we as testers step in and fix them. We clarify the requirements. How many of you have done that personally? All right, bunch. So I'm not making this up, right? The developers didn't do decent unit tests, and so we wind up as testers finding those defects for them. Been there? Done that? Got that t-shirt? Okay. The project managers didn't allow enough time for testing, so testers take it upon themselves to work nights and weekends to complete the project. Okay. How many of you raised your hands all 3 times? Yeah, all right. Too many. Because our hearts are in a good place, we want our organization to succeed. We want our project to succeed. We want our team to succeed. We want to succeed. And so we do these things. We forget about the boundaries and we step in and do what really belongs to somebody else. Psychologists have a name for this. It's called codependent behavior. In codependent behavior, we do all the wrong things for all the right reasons. Again, our hearts are in a good place. We want to succeed. And yet when others don't do what they should be doing, it is their role, it's their responsibility, it's their job, it's what they're being paid for, then we come in and take over. And ultimately, I'm not going to go through the definitions here, but the long-term consequences are these. We teach people we'll always be there to clean up their messes. We teach people they don't have to meet their commitments. Okay? We teach people that we really don't need what we're asking for. Oh, we make a big deal about, well, we need requirements that are, measurable and complete and concise and blah, 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 blah. And when they don't give them to us and we go fix them, what did we just teach? We taught that what we ask for, we really don't want. And I'm concerned about this. Forgetting the boundaries is not a good thing. Let's talk about forgetting process context. Let me tell you a story. This is the roast story. When my wife and I were newlyweds, we were both students, university students. We had essentially no money. We were going to live on love. Been there, done that? There was a day when we actually did save up enough money to go and buy our first roast. Before that, it was hamburger and tuna fish. And we were so pleased, we actually both went to the grocery store together, went to the market to pick out the roast, and brought it home, and my wife started to prepare it. The first thing she did was she unwrapped the roast, and she cut about a 1/2 inch off one end and a 1/2 inch off the other end, and put the roast in the roasting pan, and then put those 2 slices kind of sideways in the pan. And I'm looking at this, and I'm going, I don't know what this is all about. So I asked her, I said, dear, honey bun, sweetie pie, why did you just cut the ends of the roast off? And she said, well, I don't know. That's the way my mother always did it. I said, oh, well, that's interesting. Could we call your mom and ask her why? I was kind of curious about this. And so we called mom and went through the whole, cut off, put sideways. She says, oh, yeah, I do that, don't I? Well, why do you do that? I don't know. It's the way my mother did it. So we called Grandma, and we said, Grandma, what's the deal with the cutting off the ends? She said, oh, when we were newlyweds, we had this pan that was so small that no matter how small the roast was, we still had to, wouldn't fit. Now, the reason I tell you this story is I think we do this in our business a lot. We forget the context in which the process was created. Most processes could be written in the form if-then. If this is the case, then do something. But what happens over time, and here's the magic of PowerPoint, watch carefully. What was that? What we do is we forget the if part, or maybe the if part changes, and we're just left with the then part. So let me give you some examples. If it is difficult to gather, understand, and modify requirements, then we must establish formal requirements contracts with stakeholders. And that's the way it used to be. But maybe it's not anymore. But what do we still do? Formal requirements contracts, right? Except the Agile folks. Or how about this one? If once software is written, it's very difficult to change, which is the way things used to be, then we must establish detailed documentation describing the inner workings in splendid detail. But you know, that part's gone away. Software is a lot softer today than it ever has been in the past. Yet we still do this detailed definition. How about this one? If a substantial number of our testers are inexperienced, then we must document every test case in excruciating detail. And maybe that's the way it was in our organization at one time, but now we have lots of testers who are experienced, the if part goes away, and what are we left with? We still do the then. We just kind of mindlessly follow the process. So I'm concerned about that we forget the context. Another thing I'm concerned about is I think some test managers forget organizational context. How many of you, if you could create your own organization, would have the organization chart look like this? Right? Testing is the top and everybody else reports to us. It's about time that we got the power and respect that we deserve. Right? Right. I don't think this is a good idea. I think if we have this idea, and I've had this on occasion, I've wanted to grab somebody and kind of shake them and say, I want to be in charge. We need to remember that testing is a service organization. The whole process of testing is about gathering and creating and disseminating information that others can use, others in our organization can use to produce better quality products. That's our job. And that's what we ought to focus on. Okay? We do not create quality. How many of you, as testers, actually have a job title like quality assurance? Anybody here? Okay. Do you assure quality? It's a great title. I'll tell you where I think it comes from. I've never actually tested this theory. I have a theory that if you hung out in bars, guys, if you hung out in bars and tried to pick up women, that if you told them you were a software tester, you probably wouldn't get very far. But if you said, I'm in quality assurance, you might score. Now, like I say, I've never actually tested this theory, but so it is my theory. We don't create quality. All we do is look for it. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is a former president of the United States looking through binoculars that have the lens cap still on. Okay. Sigh. I also believe that testers should not be the ship or don't ship decision makers. I just don't think that's our stewardship. I think our job is to create information that others in our organization can use to make good quality decisions. That we need to remember we are a service organization and we should serve. Okay. Number 8. Forgetting to honor each other. Many of us, I guess I will take a survey. I'm a stranger here. I'll never meet you again. And many of you are strangers to each other, so it's kind of like being anonymous. Many of us work in blaming organizations. And by a blaming organization, I mean one where fixing the blame is far more important than fixing the problem. Right? If once we know that Fred screwed up or that Ethel was at fault, then we're done because we have now fixed the blame. We know who's responsible and we can go on. Isn't fixing the problem more important than fixing the blame? So let me just ask you, and everybody kind of look down so you can't see your neighbor. How many work in blaming organizations where this is kind of the focus of things? Anybody? All right. So there are like 600 people here who are not voting. and 3 honest folks in the back. I saw you there. All right. This guy named Norm Kurth. Norm is one of my heroes in our business, and he said this. He wrote a book on retrospectives, and he said this: regardless of what we discover, we understand and believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, with their skills and abilities and resources available. I think that's a great way to believe. Okay? Now, we can be fooled. We could believe this and be fooled every once in a while. But I think this is a great way to start and to honor each other, to believe that, we did the best job we could. I don't have time to tell you tales of woe in my family, but we have a couple of children who kind of went off on the wrong path. And it bothered me personally for a long, long time until I finally read this from Norm, and I realized that I did the best job I could under the circumstances, with the resources, with the knowledge, with whatever I had. I did the best job I could. Could I have done better under other circumstances? Probably so. But I was not under other circumstances. I was under the circumstances I was given, with the resources that I had, time and so on, skills, knowledge. So I think this is a great way to think about each other, to honor each other. And when we do, then we really increase communication, we increase excitement, we increase fairness and rapport, respect and trust and teamwork. And ultimately, I think when we honor each other, we increase our success as individuals, as teams, as projects, and as organizations. So don't forget to honor each other. Now, number 9, integrity. Gentlemen, imagine that this is your test manager. She comes into your office. She stands close to you. She tousles your hair a little bit as she chats with you. And she says, just sign off that you ran the test. It'll save us a lot of time. Has anybody been asked to do that? To certify that tests were run when they have not? I've got some hands. Yes. Okay. You'll just make us look bad if you put those problems into the defect tracking system. Just tell me what they are and I'll get them fixed. But don't log them. Anybody been asked to do that? Oh, a lot more hands on that one. Since we don't ship with severity 1 errors, those are the worst kinds, change all those severity 1s to 2s so that we can ship. No, more hands on that one. So I'm not making this stuff up, right? We've got an important meeting with the client this afternoon. If they ask about defects, just tell them there are a few minor ones that will be fixed, almost immediately. Been there? Done that? Okay. The word integrity in the dictionary means steadfast adherence to a strict moral or ethical code. And I think the only real power that we as testers have is our integrity. I think that's the only. Now, some of you will be lucky in your career. You'll have an organizational power, or you'll have a personal power, something based on reputation or contract or something that will give you power. But generally, I think the most of the time, the only real power we have is our integrity. They hate to see us coming. They hide under the desk when we come. But they know that we speak the truth. And I think it's important that we not forget that we maintain our integrity. Some years ago, I worked for an organization in the States, a big multinational nonprofit organization, for about 15 years. And after I left, for 2 and 3 years afterwards, people from that organization would call me to ask me for my opinion. And I said, guys, I don't even work there anymore. Why are you calling me? They said, because we trust you. Okay, we know you're honest. We know you'll tell us the truth, at least as you understand and you see. And I thought, I just get goosebumps just thinking about that right now. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to have on your tombstone when you finally depart? We could trust this person. This person had integrity. I think we as testers need that, and we dare not forget it. Well, those are my 9 forgettings. Like I say, I'm concerned that we either have forgotten some of these ideas or maybe did not even know them in the beginning. Forgetting our beginnings, forgetting to grow, forgetting to properly measure, to properly reward, forgetting the boundaries and taking over what rightly should be done by others, forgetting process context, organizational context, forgetting to honor each other, and for me the most important of these is forgetting integrity. This is my message for you today. I hope you'll remember these things and not forget them. You'll become better testers and more professional and more highly regarded if you do. So I have to close with a shameless commercial message. I wrote this book called Practitioner's Guide to Software Test Design. It's a marvelous book. I recommend it highly. And that's enough of that. Thank you.